And we're back. This is Frank Kovacs with my co-host Wanda Ellett from Rider University on 107.7 The Bronx and online at 1077thebronx.com. We're taking your calls at 877-900-1077. We're talking about this subject that basically affects everyone, because I don't know of anybody that doesn't send emails today. And really, how do you do it the correct way? How do you do it impactfully? A lot of people don't think about it. They just go on, they pull up a keyboard, they start hitting characters without really understanding what is the impact of what it is that they're putting into that keyboard. So Paul Babicki, our guest today, has written this great book called NetEtiquette. And now what we're going to get into is the next level, because he didn't even stop there with the book. He has his partner Serkan Gecmen on the phone, and together they've even developed a software that you could take your emails through and have it analyzed and give you feedback as to how well it's conforming to all of these rules and all of these different things that happen to your email when it goes through the device, the spell checker, spam checker, all of these different aspects that affect it above and beyond how the human on the other end is interpreting it. So Paul, I'll turn it over to you now, to you and Serkan, to explain what the software is, how it works, how you interact with it, and really how you could use it as a training tool to really perfect all of this advice and education that you deliver in the book.
Okay, I'll put Serkan on in a moment here, but I will premise this by telling the audience that what we try to do is parallel the human IQ, and the highest IQ a human can have is about 230. So what we're doing is rating it at the highest would be at 230, and the lowest would be certainly someone who would equate to being remedial, and you'll be able to get a rating that reflects where you sit with the populace in general. So I'll ask Serkan.
Where do most people fall in?
We don't know yet, but it's probably what I will add.
Are you fair in your grading?
Well,
I'd be afraid to take the test.
I think that what is going to happen, certainly initially, is most people will come in probably in the low 100s.
Really?
The good news is,
then you can improve.
It's an
That's
open
right.
book test. Paul has now given you the answers.
Oh, okay.
And if you read the book, you can figure out how you can do better.
You have to read the book first, and then you can take your quiz.
That's what I would do, because then you're going to come out.
Then you're going to come out.
Or
and you're going to understand why.
Or should you take it before?
But if you do it before, you'll have a baseline and see how much you improve with the book.
And then read the book.
The biggest thing is, you got to understand, like we tell everybody when they're interviewing, that every interaction is an interview.
It is.
Well, every time you send an email, you're creating a perception with people of yourself.
Any kind of communication, text message, even the phone call,
every interaction.
Really, it's every interaction.
And you probably do the most interactions a day via email.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about a person in transition, we talk to them about branding, right? Mm-hmm. Well, every time you constitute an email and hit that send button, you're branding yourself in the eyes of the people that you're sending it to. So this is an important aspect, because it's probably the biggest medium you're going to utilize during the time you're in search. And then once you land, again, they always say that your first impression is normally the lasting impression in the new company. If you were starting a new job, this is a great book to read, so that when you go in there and you're doing things, you can set yourself apart from the rest of the people and show how you're more effective when you're communicating.
What I'd like to do is have Serkan discuss the various things that will be tested when you do take the NetiquetteIQ
the clues.
test. So, Serkan, are you there?
Tips.
If you could address the basics of what the types of questions, not necessarily questions, but the types of measurements you're using in the test itself.
So how does that, like, I'm sorry to interrupt, so how does that, like, you know, because sometimes there's a sensitivity, like, do you give in your, in filling, when you're just basically putting your email into the software, or is it like you ask questions, like when you're, like, how does this user interface work? So you're gonna go in and enter in, you're just copying and pasting your email in, or are you taking like a guiding tutorial saying, I'm gonna be sending this to somebody that I know, or do you ask those kinds of questions, or how does that work? So like during the break we were talking, and then Paul was sharing, like if you're gonna send your resume over to this company, and like let's say it's a cold call type of thing, and you don't put a subject, like you leave the subject blank. Does that, like, it comes back as a negative, and then even if you just put resume in there, like as the subject, and then you just attach the resume, like what feedback do you give the person when they, like, let's say they said they're sending this into a company, into HR, they have the HR's address, and they just put resume in the subject line, and then attached, please find my resume, and thank you. Like what would come back as the feedback? Like, does it spit back, like, the feedback?
Yeah, think of it like your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
You know how you get that little rating bar at the bottom that tells you % complete?
Mm.
It's similar to that in that it's going to give you feedback. And then once you click on that and you want to see why you only got a certain percentage, it gives you the details.
Like what? Like what is it?
It'll say subject line. You know, this
like
is what you could have done.
Stink.
No, subject line, it'll give you feedback. Salutation, It'll give you feedback.
Like what kind of feedback? Will it say resume? Like let's say,
Well,
let's walk through like an example.
It'll go a little deeper than some of those items.
Mm-hmm.
For example, your tone.
Mm-hmm.
And tone is very important.
Oh, yeah.
Because let's say you're trying to
And you don't even think about it.
Exactly. You're choosing words, but you may not have done it from an arbitrary standpoint. Because when we go to write an email, what we necessarily intend to communicate, we don't have an independent way of seeing the words we chose, how they're going to be interpreted on the other side.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's why so many times, sometimes, somebody will come back to you and say, well, why were you so against my thing? I was like, what do you mean? It's just giving you feedback.
Yeah.
It's just the words, and you may not have intended that for that to come across, but unintentionally that's what happened. So this tool, if you use it as an intermediary, just like you would spell check, run it through there and see, here's an independent way of reviewing it for you and giving you that feedback so you could avoid that possibility of ever happening.
So like we were talking during the break too about that resume email, where if you left the subject header blank, it may not, and I guess we started talking about that earlier before the break, saying it may not even be read, they may not even know about you, or, you're like, what the heck?
The odds of it being read are greatly reduced.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to give another example that a lot of people make mistakes with, and that is to do with tone. There's a big difference between certain types of requests and certain types of commands.
Mm-hmm.
I might say to Frank, let's meet for your radio program tomorrow at 7:30.
Mm-hmm.
Now that sounds pretty reasonable,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're speaking to a stranger and you say, let's meet, call me back, it sounds like a command to some people, as opposing to say, please call me back or I will call you. That's a much better way to say it, and that's something that the NetiquetteIQ test will pick up.
See, the thing is when Paul is explaining this to you, he can do inflection with his voice that won't come through if it's just written word. And what Serkan and Paul have done is looked at just that written word and shows you how it's going to be interpreted. So without the ability of having somebody saying it and doing that inflection, words, if you just transcribed them and did the exact same thing with them, could be misinterpreted. And they point that out to you by running the email through this software.
I'm sorry, all that comes to mind is the rain in Spain. It's almost like that whole thing. Like, it's like, no, again, you're not saying it correctly. So it's almost like that same kind of concept where,
That's 100% correct.
And we get caught up in what's in our head and what we're saying. And how many times are you really half listening when you're writing your email?
Mm-hmm.
You're usually preoccupied, maybe the TV's on, or somebody came in your office and they're talking to you, or something, but you continue to write.
Mm.
The worst thing you can do at that point is hit send, because you really haven't devoted even your mindset to what you're putting in that message.
Yeah.
But then, above and beyond this, Paul and Serkan's email really train you to how that person is going to perceive it. And, here, in this day and age, relationships are very important.
It's critical power.
Now, we've all grown up thinking that the golden rule was treat others how you want to be treated. Now we have the platinum rule, which says treat people how they want to be treated, right?
Yeah.
Well, this allows you that independence of saying generally how people are going to interpret that email from their standpoint, which you may not be able to see through your eyes.
Mm.
This gives you that independent assessment of the majority of the time, given the words you used, this is how it's going to come out to the other person. To me, it's invaluable.
Yeah, that's priceless.
Yeah.
That really is priceless. So it, like, when you say it gives you feedback, like what kind, like, can you walk us through, like, even that horrible, like, resume? But it's not even horrible, like
Well,
somebody.
she would just like to see if you went
Like-
and sent this email through your software,
What
a
comes
sample, if you could run through Serkan, what she would get back.
Mm. Resume. No, it just says resume. Does it tell you how to improve it? Does it give you that suggestion, or that's through the book?
That's through the book.
Okay. So you gotta do more homework.
But at least you
It's
know.
now you know.
If you don't
And
have
to
the
know,
awareness.
to know better is to do better.
Exactly. If you don't have the awareness, you just blindly go forward and you don't even know. Well, think about the impact of that.
Yeah.
What do people do in transition? They'll go and they'll find their job, and they usually reuse what they wrote.
Yeah.
So if they had this problem in this initial email and
It's
then
repeated.
reused it for the next 30 times they send something out, they've just perpetuated that mistake and that fatal error 30 times.
Yeah. And there's 100 million different things that, you know, that could be happening. And that's where, like, even in the career you have to boot camp, that's come out, you know, a number of times where it's just like somebody's like, I didn't even think about that. You know, it's just
Exactly.
these little nuances. And here is just another nuance that you're not even thinking about.
But, you know, from my Bell Labs days, the things that I always loved were the people that came up with the patent or the solution that was to the things that were right in front of us.
Mhm.
People are using email
Why
every
didn't I
day
think of that?
Yeah, they're
It's
using
an aha
at
moment.
record levels, but nobody's ever taken the time to how you do it correctly
Yeah.
and how you're more effective in it. And to me, if you're going to be using this as your medium in your professional life, your personal life, in job transition, in order to, you know, make an impact, even, you know, when you're in school as a student and you're emailing your professors, think of the edge that it's going to give you every step of the way. This is really branding yourself. This is how you're leaving an impression of what it is you're trying to communicate beyond what you're trying to accomplish, what you're communicating. Imagine if it's an important business deal
Yeah.
or getting a job and you go and you really blow it in an email, and that's at the essence of why you're not getting it. Now you'll finally have that insight that you're doing that wrong and you can change it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people will go blindly through life and never even know that something that they're using at such volume is really the thing that's hindering them from being
Yeah.
successful.
And this is a tool to get you unstuck.
That's absolutely correct. And I'd like to point out that the book is also a reference work. So that can be used initially or over the period of many years.
Yeah, well, the other thing I would say is I'm sure you guys are probably going to be following up. Once you get, you know, the statistics around running through, you know, thousands, millions of emails, and you see the trends,
Yeah.
I'm sure that, you know, you'll probably come back with maybe the top
Rules
100
too.
mistakes that people make and things like that, because over time, you know, everybody, once you get
There's
to that
no
next
way.
plateau, then you can see the next plateau that you can go to. This is Frank Kovacs with my co-host Wanda Ellett from Rider University on 107.7 The Bronx and online at 1077thebronx.com. We're taking your calls at 877-900-1077. We're discussing with Paul and Serkan their new book, Net Etiquette, as well as the software, and we'll get into the blog site as well that they have. And very interesting stuff. We can't wait to get back. Thank you.